Hey there everyone, it's Brendan here and a welcome back to another cryptocurrency market update. And there's been a lot going on in the world of cryptocurrency, especially over the last week or two. And most notably, what we've seen here is actually a decent sized pullback across the board. So this means that Bitcoin is down around 17% from top to bottom. Ethereum is down around 25% from top to bottom. And most of the mainstream altcoin market is down anywhere from roughly 20 to 30%, with one exception. And I want to talk about that in today's video. So what I'm going to do here and what my goal is to catch everyone up to speed on everything that's happened, the catalyst for this downside move, and what I think could happen next, as well as one area that is definitely standing out in the current market environment. So if that sounds interesting, all that we ask is that if you like the content that we make, consider hitting that like and subscribe button and maybe checking out some of the links in the description down below where you can join our different communities like Crypt Nation and Altcoin Alert. Now, with that being said, let's go ahead and kick things off and talk about this catalyst on Bitcoin first, because the crypto market here is really giving us one of the first pullbacks that we have seen in a long time. And I know the whole way up over here, people were like, when are we going to get a pullback? When am I going to get an entry opportunity? And we saw one a few weeks ago, but it was really short-lived, where Bitcoin pulled back from roughly $69,000 all the way down to like $58,000, $59,000. But it only lasted a few hours. And so most people missed out on this opportunity unless they had some sort of limit order down here, right? Now, what we're seeing here is, roughly the same size pullback. This one was around 15%. And from top to bottom, what we've seen over here was actually a little bit more than that. So with us kind of pulling back for an extended period of time, it's finally giving people a little bit of an entry opportunity. Now, with Bitcoin breaking down here, the one major catalyst that is causing this is the Grayscale flows. Now, if you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, Grayscale is one of the entities that got a Bitcoin ETF approved. And since then, I have the flow chart in front of me. You can see that they have not had a single day of positive inflows. In fact, every single day since the ETF has released, they have had negative outflows, which means that they have been selling off this amount of money over the period of time. Now, you can see on some days it is $500, $400, $600 million worth of Bitcoin that they are dumping onto the market. Other days, it has been pretty low. And so when the ETFs were released, you can see that they had a massive amount of outflows. Again, 400, 500, 600 million plus every day in selling off Bitcoin and GBTC outflows. And then during the period of February, it was a little bit lower. They were still selling off 50, 100, maybe $200 million worth of Bitcoin a day, but it was a lot lower. Now, recently, you've noticed that this has cranked up again. And the big point here is that actually on March 18th, they had their largest day of outflows to date, which hit a new high of $642.5 million worth of outflows just a few days ago on the 18th. Now, the reason that I'm bringing this up is because when they are selling this amount of Bitcoin, it's a ton, it affects the price because they're just dumping it onto the market. Now, I want to show you all a little bit of a correlation that I have noticed. Again, note that when the ETFs released around mid to end January, this is when there was a ton of outflows. Then February, the outflows were really low, and recently it's picked up again. Well, let's go look at the price chart of Bitcoin and see if there's any kind of a correlation here. And what do you know? If we zoom out towards the end of January, mid-end of January when the ETFs were released and Grayscale was selling $600 million worth of Bitcoin, what do you know? The price is retracing during this period. And then over the course of February, when the outflows from GBTC and Grayscale were really low, prices were soaring, because if we go and we look at the rest of the ETFs, they're still buying hundreds of millions, almost in some days, almost billions a day. And we've actually seen days where the net inflows or the total inflows was over $1 billion. So all these other entities, whether it is BlackRock or Fidelity or ARK or any of the other ones out there, Van Eyck, etc., they have been having hundreds of millions, sometimes even billions of dollars of inflows per day. So on the periods where we see that Grayscale is again ramping up their selling pressure, prices falling because the inflows and everyone buying Bitcoin can't keep up with them dumping $500-600 million of Bitcoin a day onto the market. And so you'll see that this is the period where they were dumping last time. This is the period that they are dumping again. And then this is the period where their dumping was minimal. It was still there. It was around 50, 100, 200 million a day, but it wasn't 5 or 600 million a day. And so the reason that I'm bringing this up is because since their ETF has launched, they have lost almost half of their Bitcoin under management. So they started out with over 600,000 Bitcoin. They're now down into the 300,000s in terms of Bitcoin, total Bitcoin that they own. So they've lost almost half of the Bitcoin under their management service. And with that, they can't continue to keep this kind of selling pressure up. I mean, if they keep it up for another 2 months, then they're at risk of running out of all their Bitcoin under management. So it's something to kind of think about, is that they can't continue this selling pressure forever. We saw how long it lasted last time. We can look at how long it could last this time. Again, maybe we go a little bit lower. Maybe they keep it up for a little bit longer. I'm not saying that the bottom has to be in, but we saw what kind of pullback we got last time. And I'm kind of looking over here saying, maybe we get the same kind of thing again before they take their foot off the gas pedal and maybe put on the brakes a little bit. And when they do that, when the outflows from Grayscale stop being hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars every day, that is when I think we are going to get a nice sharp rise in Bitcoin's price. So with Bitcoin actually retracing back down here to its previous low, this is going to be an area of support. Now, if this breaks, Bitcoin has the potential down to around the mid 50,000s, around the 50-day moving average, but Ethereum's kind of in the same boat, right? So with Ethereum kind of pulling back over here, Ethereum saw a tremendous bounce off of its previous low and off of the 50-day moving average. It hit this area, had a massive green day, and one of the catalysts that helped this was actually looking at what happened with the Fed the other day. So the Fed has this event that they run called FOMC, and they talk about interest rates and a bunch of other economic data. And basically, everyone was a little bit nervous that they were going to potentially talk about a more hawkish stance. Some numbers came out, some data came out, and it indicated that inflation could actually be getting a little bit worse rather than better. So if inflation was going to get worse and the Fed addressed this in the same, in light of that information, then that could mean that they become more hawkish and that they don't want to cut interest rates. What happened was Jerome Powell, the head of the Fed, or the chairman of the Fed, came out and he was still as dovish as could be. He said, hey, we're not really concerned. We're still going to plan on doing 3 rate cuts. And the market reacted really positively. And the reason for this is because when there is a more dovish view of the market, investors tend to become more risk on with their assets. And, risk on assets include things like stocks, but also the crypto markets. So if you were to come out with a really hawkish stance and talk about maybe even no plans to cut or maybe even plans to hike, then risk on investors would be less interested in getting into the market. But as opposed to that, we actually saw the more dovish stance, which promotes more risk on investors and risk on investments, including cryptocurrency. So everything had a really positive reaction to this news. And this is an overall good thing for long-term sentiment. And that was definitely something that impacted the markets. So as we're looking at all this stuff, the crypto markets are pulling back, but it's really off of one catalyst. And all of the rest of the information, all the rest of the data is still looking good. And this is actually something that I've done before, but if we go and we look at how the crypto market has reacted in previous market cycles over here, then we can see that it's not uncommon to get these kind of pullbacks. I mean, look at the previous market cycle over here, where the crypto market had all of these double-digit pullbacks after the halving event. Or even the market cycle before that one, where we had all of these pullbacks yet again over here. If we can zoom in a little bit more, there we go. You can see that we have all these other double-digit pullbacks after the halving event. And so when we get these kind of pullbacks, you have to remember that it's still very, very normal. And although we might get some choppiness with the ETF stuff that's happening in the outflows and the halving being right around the corner, I think overall here, the bulk of the data, again, minus the Grayscale outflows, that's really the only negative thing that we have here. Everything else is still saying, hey, the markets are bullish, and I don't see too much to contradict that. Now, again, that doesn't mean that I don't think that things can't go a little bit lower, but again, I think the overall trend here is maybe what we like to call a slip, dip, and then a rip. So time will tell with this. Again, I'm looking at the macros here and I'm still very much bullish. I think it's pretty hard to have a bearish stance up here when so many different metrics and data still look very positive. You look at activity, you look at growth, you look at institutional interest, and a lot of that stuff is doing really well, even social activity. So that's going to wrap us up for this week's market. Oh, and I almost forgot. We talked about this one area that was doing really good. What a clickbait that would have been. But this one area that's doing really good is the real world assets and tokenization space. And you look at, a bunch of these different cryptocurrencies that are tied to that space, whether it's like, Axelar, Centrifuge, Goldfinch, Ondo, Maple, etc. There's all these cryptos in the space that had these giant moves to the upside in recent days. Ondo being one of them that did like 100% in the matter of like a 48-hour window, 72-hour window. And there's a bunch of other ones as well that are just ripping in terms of price. And you look at all these charts that are just pointed straight upwards over here. And it's something that you like to see. And so, they are pulling back a little bit with the whole crypto market pulling back today. But it is one of those areas where, again, even as the crypto market is falling, they were tearing because there was some really positive news about BlackRock wanting to get involved in that space as well. But we're going to talk about that in more detail in this week's Crypt Nation newsletter. So if you are a Crypt Nation newsletter, you can look forward to that. And if you aren't and you want to join Crypt Nation and you want to join our crypto community, then definitely check out the links in the description below or check us out at Crypt Nation because it's a nice little community where you can get more plugged in to the crypto world that we all live in here. So thank you all for watching. We're going to wrap things up here, but we will see all of you in next week's video.